With Webtoon's 2025 contest on the horizon, the pressure to get submissions finished is rising pretty quickly, and I am no exception to this pressure. For those of you new here, I am planning on entering Webtoon's 2025 contest. We have just under 2 months before the contest submissions open, and about 4 before the contest submission period closes for good. I'm about finished with my first episode for the contest, but I've been working on it since like December, so I'm a little worried about completing all 3 episodes before submissions open. It has almost like 120 panels, so that's kind of why it's taken me so long. I swear I'm not that slow, it just has a lot of panels, but I'll get into that later. For this video, I kind of wanted to talk about creating my story for the contest, as well as just sort of exploring a lot of the concepts, and also talk about a few things that helped me while figuring out the story and what I wanted to make. The genre I'm entering for the contest is going to be the most epic category. The primary genre is fantasy, and action is more so the secondary genre, but I'd also say adventure would be the secondary genre, but fortunately that's not a genre on Webtoon, which is honestly kind of disappointing, but oh well, whatever. Or honestly, even drama would be a good fit, but I'm choosing action specifically just because I feel like it fits the first 3 episodes for my submission specifically better than drama would. I know most people either think way too much about their genre and worry about it, or don't think at all about their genre and just kind of throw in something they think that might fit the genre of their story. Definitely take some time to figure out your genre. Is a lot more important than many people give it credit for, especially because genre can help you push your story in certain directions, and it also like sets your reader up for specific expectations. You know, readers would probably be pretty thrown for a loop if they clicked on a story whose genre was labeled as romance and then they only got a romance subplot and the main focus of the story was like uncovering a murder mystery or something. But don't stress about the genre either, pick one and then stick with it. Most people's stories can fall under multiple genres, and some can even lean into like 5+ genres, but really think about the core aspects of your story and the overall goal of your characters to help you narrow those down into one main genre. For my comic, I'd say it falls under like 4 to 5 different genres, but they're not the most prevalent ones to fit the overarching narrative. Also, if you hear meowing, I'm so sorry. My cat, I just woke him up from talking, and he's not very happy at me. My comic in particular focuses on the main character Miri and the journey she and her companions go on as she battles with the responsibility of having to quite literally sacrifice herself for the greater good of some random magical island that she has no memories of. The entire story is supposedly leading up to the eventual sacrifice of this young girl and how it affects her mental, physical, and emotional health. Does the survival of the island really outweigh the life of a girl? And who's to say whether it does or not? These are like some core aspects of my comic that I use to determine my genres. Obviously, fantasy is probably going to be the most prevalent since the entire story takes place on a fictional, magical island with whimsical landscapes and where many characters have magical powers, and literally sacrificing, which is also a fantastical concept, usually, so I had to go with fantasy as my main genre. Right now, I'm still kind of contemplating the name of my comic. I genuinely struggle with coming up with a title the most out of almost every other aspect of creating a story. I think it's because there's a lot of pressure since the title tends to be the first thing an audience judges your story on aside from like the cover art. I was originally planning on just calling it Miri after my main character, but I really didn't like that. I'm not the biggest fan of titles based off of the main character's name. They can definitely work in some circumstances, but I think it's a bit of an overused trope, so I decided to like explore other options I have. One that I'm quite liking right now a bit is She's the Sacrifice, because I think it's pretty compelling and presents a few questions in the reader's mind, like who is she, why is she being sacrificed, among a few other things. I also think it really leans into the core concepts of my story, like the few things I mentioned, but it also sort of subverts expectations, as most people don't expect the main character to be actively working towards their own demise. I'm not 100% set on that one though, and I'll probably end up changing it because I'm like the most indecisive person on the planet when it comes to naming things. I will definitely keep you guys updated though, so that you'll know what to look for when the contest rolls around. But I can't really go any further without really talking about what my comic's premise really is. I'll read you guys like the curt synopsis I have at the moment. After waking up on a strange island with no memories, Miri learns that she's been chosen as a sacrifice to save the island from a cycle of destruction, ending the lives of everyone on it over and over again. Forced to team up with a cunning demon carrying his own secrets named Lyre, the two of them set out to bring Miri to her final destination, but as she uncovers both the island's and her own secrets, will Miri be able to accept her fate, or will she defy being a sacrifice meant to save them all? So my comic really just focuses on the 2 main characters, Miri and Lyre. However, there are a lot of pretty important secondary characters in the story, and we get to explore a lot of them as well, particularly like the 3 rulers and their assistants, each who rule a little section of the island. The premise has kind of bounced all over the place since I first decided I wanted to make this story. I originally planned for it to be a video game, and I still plan on making that come true one day, but right now it's gonna be a webtoon. No games right now for me. But because of this, like a lot of concepts and the ideas are like vastly different from what they currently are now. Video games can translate their plots into a different media, like webcomics, fairly smoothly, but the storytelling methods and like hooks and things like art direction are going to be very different. I think the biggest difference between my first idea for the story and like what it is now is the ending. That has changed like 3 to 4 times, and I'm not even 100% on the ending at the moment either, but I plan on kind of like fleshing that out more during the judging period of the contest so that when I go to work on the rest of the comic, I actually know what the direction is that I'm gonna go in. Mary has also changed quite a bit from her original design, and like overall, like just her character has changed a lot. She was originally really young, like probably 5 to 6 years old. Now she's around preteen to early teenage. I'm a sucker for like really young kids being the main character in a darker or like more intense story. I just think there's a lot of cool storytelling opportunities with that. That was for the game idea, and I'm not sure how interesting it would be for the main character of a webcomic to be that young, but I mean, I guess you never know. Miri is a very funny character to me. She's very odd and does things very unconventionally. It's really entertaining for me to plan out scenes with like her and Lyra, as they're both very like opposing characters, especially in the way they like think and plan things out. Lyra's super cunning and like straightforward and very logical when it comes to achieving his goals, whereas like Miri always finds some weird and roundabout way to get there. Their dynamic is like one of my favorites in the whole comic. The themes of my story are pretty prevalent. A lot of people kind of like disregard themes and overall motifs of their story, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're wanting to make a more serious story that is taken seriously, choosing themes and like sticking to them is pretty important. In my comic, the primary themes are breaking the cycle, both metaphorically and literally, and self-acceptance and like forgiveness and stuff like that. I like to put deeper themes into my story just because they help me personally stay interested and attached to the comics I make, and readers can catch on to these themes pretty easily, so when they do, it sort of creates like this connection between them and your story that wouldn't be there as strongly if your comic was just a couple characters goofing off. Not to say that like a story like that can't have that emotional connection, because it definitely can, and I find myself liking media like that pretty often. I just found that I personally get more invested into stories that are consistent and have like deeper meanings. Having a thematic storyline is also like helps you as a writer stay on track with your plot and story. If you reach a story point or moment in the writing that doesn't contribute at all to your overarching theme or like your character's development, then it's probably not very beneficial to have it in there. I constantly find myself writing and like removing scenes because in my head they sound fun. When I look back at them, I realize they don't really have, like, they don't contribute anything thematically or even do anything like remotely interesting. I feel like it gets easier to recognize and combat that as you practice writing more and more. But getting my comic to where it is now took a lot of brainpower, probably the most brainpower any story of mine has like taken from me. All stories start out from just like an idea, right? And most of my comics start from like a scene or visual, like an emotional moment or like some cool landscape or something. This comic was a little different though, because the idea I first got for this story was not a very visual one, like in my opinion. While I was brainstorming story ideas, I started like diving into cliches and tropes, which I find like fun to do because I like to try and break or mess around with them in my stories. Then I stumbled upon the Chosen One trope. Like, everybody knows what this, like, the Chosen One trope is. It's literally the most prevalent trope in basically modern day media. But usually the Chosen One trope goes something like this. A character is chosen or fated by some sort of prophecy or wise or maybe even like otherworldly person or being to be the one to save the world or bring peace or something. I actually really love the Chosen One trope. I'm just a huge sucker for it. I don't know if it's because it's like, it just has like this fun power fantasy within it or what, but like I love it. It's obviously a pretty overused trope though. It's super prevalent within media made specifically for like men for some reason, like in shonen anime or manga and like things like that. So I started thinking of ideas I could use to like explore or potentially subvert this trope. And then that's kind of how I got the idea for making my main character the Chosen One, except they, one, do not actively want to save the world like most Chosen Ones do, and two, are actually supposed to die in order to save the world. Like, that's her whole purpose. I also try to make genres and tropes more appealing to wider audiences, so I figured, hey, why not make the character a girl too? So that's kind of how the idea for like Miri and the story first kind of sparked into my brain. From there, I spent a long time building up some like visual references and brainstorming concepts for the story, particularly in the form of like mood boards and really, really long Google Doc brain dumps. I find it easiest to just be able to like throw out every single idea I have into some place that I can come back to, because a lot of my very first ideas are still used in some way in the current story, so I keep track of that kind of stuff because it can just be really useful later. I find it the most helpful to flesh out my story by presenting like questions from the ideas I already have planned out. So, for example, the main character is the Chosen One who is given the hefty responsibility of sacrificing herself to save an island. What would be a few questions within that concept to help me flesh out my story? Well, what is she saving the island from? Why does it need saving? Well, maybe there's a strange pollution that is spreading throughout the island and turning everyone it touches into monsters and killing everything else. Okay, well, where's the pollution coming from? Maybe the people of the island don't know where it's coming from. Why don't they know where it's coming from? Yeah, you get the idea. That's sort of the main way I flesh out my comics, just presenting questions that might come up from each little bit of lore or plot. After I had the general concept down, I went about exploring the world a bit more. A lot of the mood boards and reference images I had gathered were inspirations for the actual island and like its visuals and looks, especially because like the video game idea for the story, it would be largely adventure based, so having cool locations and like interesting scenery would be pretty important. I still wanted to like carry that over into my webtoon, so I spent a while trying to figure out how to make the island interesting and make it feel almost like a character itself. Hot take, guys, but people do not put enough effort into their settings anymore. Like, it makes me sad. Your setting is just as much a character and storytelling device as like everything else. I want more cool worlds, guys. I need it. I don't have a ton of actual concept art I created myself, but I do have a pretty good idea of what most areas of the island will look like. Here's a few pieces of concept art I made like a while ago, so they're not really lore accurate anymore, but they're still fun. That's what concept art is for. The island is split into 3 sectors. Well, there's technically like 4, but 3 of them are more prevalent than the other, and the 4th one is like kind of a secret, but you didn't hear that from me. I wanted each sector of the island to feel like its own little area with its own like culture and landscape, climate, technology, beliefs, you know, all that jazz. I wanted each section of the island to be sort of metaphorical of the main character's journey, as well as just have some deeper theoretical meanings aligning with the theme of my story. The first section of the island that Miri wakes up in and meets Lyre and focuses on having a bit of a whimsical and ethereal vibe, representing like a sort of childlike wonder, you know, you have when you're like a kid and the world's cool and life hasn't hit you yet. It's sort of dreamlike, which I think is very fun. There's a lot of purples and pinks and pastels for the color palette, but I think this is a great place to start my story because it sets a certain expectation for the rest of the story on the island. You know, if you've found yourself in a beautiful seaside town with purple trees and lilacs everywhere and cool waterfalls, and you meet the nicest people and everything just seems like super utopian almost, then suddenly everything blows up and you discover the entire island hates you and wants you dead, that would be kind of crazy. Each section of the island is also run by its like own ruler, which is pretty important for the overarching storyline. One of my favorite parts about the world building is like adding unique holidays and traditions to the story. In my comic, and it's pretty early on too, there's a little festival called the Festival of Wishes, which ends up being a dynamic plot point for the 2 main characters and helps kind of guide them into the second section of the story. It's basically where everyone on the island is given a little ball to make a wish in, and then they bring it to the festival where it has a chance of being chosen and granted by the first sector's ruler named Milione. She has the power to grant wishes, but it's funny because this power seems really strong, but it's actually quite limited. Milione can only grant maybe like 2 to 3 wishes every year or so, and depending on the wish, sometimes it just doesn't come true. But she's like really well liked because of this power, and the whole festival is like quite a big deal for the entire island, even those living outside of Milione's section of the island, since it sort of helps perpetuate a sense of hope among the people living on the island. Fun fact, everyone on the island knows the island is going to be destroyed, and they know exactly when too. And now that brings us to where the story is today. I've been working on it for really only like a few months at this point, but I got the original idea for this back in March of last year, so it's been something floating around in my brain for a while. I don't have the entire script done. I honestly only have the script done for the first episode, but I do have an outline done for the next 2. There's also a lot of middle parts of the story that haven't been decided or fleshed out yet, but it's getting there, I promise. I want to hopefully get some feedback on a lot of plot points that have yet to be set in stone before, you know, I move on to stuff like that. I'm sure a lot of that went over your guys' head because I rambled for way too long. This video was supposed to be like 10 minutes. But I just really wanted to get on here and like talk about aspects of my comic and how it originated. I'm like so excited to post this comic when the contest opens because I'm actually like super proud of it. My last comic was one of my favorite stories I've ever made, and it's like super near and dear to me, but I just didn't have the technical skill or writing skills to pull it off the way I would have liked to back then. Now that I'm better both artistically and with writing, I feel like I've got a really solid thing going on with this comic. I've shared the first episode so far with a few people, and I've gotten some really great feedback, as well as like learned a lot of people actually really like it, so that's super fun. Like I was saying at the beginning, I've only got the first episode like 70% finished, which is really scary, but it's fine. The next 2 episodes will only have like 60 panels max, which I'll be able to knock out really easily. This first episode, which you're watching me draw by the way, is crazy long, and I did not mean to make it that long, but I really wanted to put all my punches in the first episode since it's arguably the most important episode. Don't be like me, guys. Draw a normal amount of panels, please. If you have any questions for me about my comic or are interested in hearing more about certain things, please let me know in the comments. And if you want to stay updated and know when I'll be posting the comic for the contest as well, and like it's a title when I figure that out, then you should definitely subscribe because I will be posting about that stuff in the community tab. Oh, and like the video. I also want to give you guys a little update on the future of my channel. I want to stick with art-themed videos, obviously, and I'll continue making like Webtoon contest content probably until the end of the contest, but after that I want to branch out into like a wider artistic channel, if that makes sense. I have so many like story time videos I can make, or like funny challenges, like art challenges and stuff. That's my plan for now. I'll probably also continue making Webtoon like videos past the contest because I have a lot of thoughts and opinions on like certain trends in Webtoon media right now. Webtoon YouTube media specifically. But anyways, I hope you guys stick around for the long run to see where things go. Anyways, that's all for now. Bye bye!